You're standing in the grocery store checkout line on a Wednesday evening, watching the total climb on the screen, $87.43. You've got $94 in your checking account and rent clears tomorrow morning. The cashier is scanning the last items, milk, bread, pasta, and you're doing mental gymnastics, trying to remember if that $7 pending charge from Monday has cleared yet. You start calculating, maybe you can put back the coffee, save $11, just drink the terrible stuff at work for another week. Then you remember your daughter needs a poster board for a school project due Friday. Your chest tightens. This is the math you do every single day, not whether to invest in index funds or real estate, but whether you can afford eggs and coffee in the same shopping trip. And the exhausting part isn't the numbers. It's that no matter how carefully you calculate, you're always playing a rigged game. My name is William, and I've spent more hours than I'd like to admit studying the mechanics of financial inequality, not the abstract kind discussed in economics papers, but the lived experience of why having no money costs you money. Today, we're not talking about building wealth or optimizing investment portfolios. We're talking about something more fundamental. Why being broke is a trap engineered with mathematical precision, and why every financial decision you make from that position costs you approximately twice what it costs someone with capital. Here's the conventional narrative. Poverty is a discipline problem. The mainstream advice sounds reasonable on its surface. Skip the daily coffee, stop ordering takeout, cancel subscriptions you don't need, track every expense in a spreadsheet. The implicit assumption is that poor people are poor because they make poor choices, and if they just exercised more self-control, they'd be fine. This framework treats poverty as a behavioral disorder that can be cured through better habits. But this completely misses the structural reality of how money works at different wealth levels. Being broke isn't expensive because of the lattes you buy. It's expensive because you're locked into a parallel pricing system where everything costs more, your time has less value, and the institutions designed to help you instead extract fees from your desperation. The problem isn't your behavior. The problem is that the economic system charges a premium for having no money, and that premium compounds in ways that make escape nearly impossible. There's a concept economists occasionally reference but rarely explain to regular people, and it's the key to understanding why wealth inequality isn't just unfair, it's exponentially self-reinforcing. They call it capital efficiency, but I think of it as the multiplication penalty. When you have capital, every dollar you spend buys you the thing you need plus time, plus optionality, plus reduced future costs. When you don't have capital, every dollar you spend buys you the thing you need and nothing else, and often less than the thing you need, which means you'll be buying it again soon. Let me show you how this plays out in something as ordinary as furniture. Someone with $1,200 available walks into a furniture store and buys a solid wood bed frame. It's heavy, well-constructed, boring to look at maybe, but it'll last 15 years without issue. Total cost over those 15 years, $1,200 or $80 per year. Someone with $47 in their account needs a bed frame right now because their old one collapsed last night. They go to a discount store and buy a particle board frame for $89. It wobbles immediately. Within 18 months, the support slats crack. They buy another one, same price. Over those same 15 years, they've purchased 8 bed frames, totaling $712. But that's not the real cost. The real cost includes the 3 times they had to borrow money from family to replace it urgently, the stress of sleeping on a broken frame for weeks while saving up, the back pain from inadequate support that led to missing work, and the mental energy spent managing a perpetual furniture crisis. The total cost, financial and psychological, is somewhere north of $2,000 for a worse outcome. This is the multiplication penalty in action. The person with capital paid $1,200 once and forgot about it. The person without capital paid $2,000 plus in increments, with interest and stress compounded throughout. They worked harder, planned more carefully, and still paid 67% more for an inferior product. The system isn't neutral, it's extractive. Consider the mathematics of transportation. Someone with good credit and $4,000 saved for a down payment walks into a dealership and finances a 3-year-old Honda Civic. Purchase price $16,000. Interest rate 4.9%. Loan term 60 months. Monthly payment $300. Total interest paid over the life of the loan $2,000. Total cost of ownership over 10 years, including that financing cost, maintenance, insurance, roughly $26,000. The car runs reliably for a decade with nothing but routine maintenance. Transportation cost per month $217. Someone with bad credit and no savings needs a car immediately because the bus doesn't reach their new job location. They find a special financing, no credit check dealer. They put $500 down on a 9-year-old car with 140,000 miles. Purchase price $8,500, which the dealer inflated from the $4,800 it's actually worth. Interest rate 22%, loan term 72 months, because that's the only way to make the monthly payment affordable. Monthly payment $215. They'll pay $15,480 total for a car worth $4,800, but the car doesn't last 72 months. It dies at month 43. They've paid $9,245 for a vehicle that is now unsellable scrap. They still owe $4,100 on a car that doesn't exist. They need another car immediately. The cycle repeats. Over that same 10-year period, they've financed 3 vehicles using this model, paid roughly $34,000 in car payments and delinquency fees, and they currently own a car worth $1,200 with 180,000 miles. They paid 31% more than the person with capital, drove far less reliable vehicles, experienced multiple transportation crises, and ended with an asset worth 85% less. The difference isn't effort or planning, it's access to capital, which determines what interest rate you pay, which determines total cost of ownership, which determines whether you can ever save enough to escape the high interest trap. You're not paying for the car, you're paying a fee for being poor. The fee is mandatory and non-negotiable. The banking system formalizes this extraction mechanism. If you maintain a balance above $1,500, your checking account is free. No monthly maintenance fee, no minimum balance charges, no transaction limits. If your balance drops below $500, you're charged $12 monthly. That's $144 annually for the privilege of being broke. You're paying the bank to hold your money, or more accurately, to hold your lack of money. Then there's the overdraft mechanism. You've got $23 in your account, you forgot about an automatic payment for $28. The bank processes it, charges you $36 for the overdraft, and now you're negative $41. Your paycheck doesn't hit until Friday, 3 days away. On Wednesday, another automatic payment for $15 processes. You don't have $15, you have negative $41. The bank charges you another $36 for the second overdraft. When your paycheck deposits on Friday, let's say $680, the bank immediately deducts the negative $41 balance plus $72 in overdraft fees. Your $680 paycheck becomes $567. You've effectively paid $72 to borrow $43 for 3 days. That's an annualized interest rate of approximately 18,000%. Last year, American banks collected $8.4 billion in overdraft fees. Research shows these fees disproportionately impact accounts with balances below $350, which means they're almost exclusively extracted from people who can least afford them. It's mathematically elegant wealth transfer, moving money from people who have none to institutions that have billions. Meanwhile, someone with $50,000 in their checking account is getting 0.01% interest, functionally nothing, but they're not paying fees. If they need to borrow money, they can get a personal loan at 7% interest. They can get approved for a credit card with 14.99% APR and a $15,000 limit, which they use strategically and pay off monthly, incurring zero interest. The person with $23 in their account can't access any of those products. They pay 18,000% effective interest through overdraft mechanics. The distance between these two financial realities is approximately $50,000 in liquid capital. Here's where the psychological mechanics become brutal. There's a documented cognitive phenomenon where financial stress directly impairs executive function, your ability to plan, reason, and make complex decisions. Researchers at Princeton found that when you're preoccupied with money scarcity, your effective cognitive capacity drops by roughly 13 to 14 IQ points. That's equivalent to pulling an all-nighter or being moderately intoxicated. Think about what that means. When you're broke, your brain is running constant background calculations. Can I afford gas to get to work tomorrow? If I skip lunch, can I buy groceries Friday? What happens if my daughter gets sick and needs to see a doctor? This persistent calculation occupies so much mental bandwidth that you literally have less cognitive capacity available for everything else, including the strategic thinking required to escape the situation causing the stress. This creates decisions that look irrational to outside observers but are perfectly logical from inside the scarcity mindset. Taking a payday loan at 400% APR sounds insane until you understand the alternative is eviction and homelessness. Buying dollar store tools that break immediately instead of quality tools that last seems foolish until you realize you have $8 right now and the quality tools cost $45 you won't have for 3 weeks. You're not making bad decisions, you're making the only available decision within severe constraints while operating with diminished cognitive capacity due to the stress of those constraints. The person with capital doesn't face these calculations, they're not smarter or more disciplined. They're operating in a different cognitive environment where long-term planning is possible because immediate survival isn't in question. That's the invisible advantage of having money. It literally makes you smarter by freeing up mental resources for strategic thinking. Let me tell you about the threshold that changes everything. There's a specific point where the mathematics of money fundamentally shift, where you cross from the extractive poverty economy into the neutral general economy. It's not retirement savings, it's not a down payment on a house, and it's not 6 months of expenses. The threshold is smaller than you think and more powerful than anyone tells you. The number is $1,800 in completely liquid, untouched savings. I know that sounds almost insulting in its modesty, but here's why this specific number represents a phase transition in your financial physics. At $1,800, you have enough to absorb any single common emergency without triggering a catastrophe cascade. Your tire blows out, $180 to replace it. Annoying, but not catastrophic. Your kid needs urgent dental work, $600. You handle it. Your laptop dies and you need it for work, $450 for a refurbished replacement. You survive. But more importantly, at $1,800, you can start making decisions based on total cost instead of minimum monthly payment. You can comparison shop. You can wait 3 days to research the best option instead of buying whatever's available at the corner store right now. You can say no to predatory financing. You can negotiate from a position that isn't pure desperation. Watch what happens to your expenses when you have this buffer. You've been paying $45 monthly for phone service on a prepaid plan because you can't pass the credit check for a contract. With $1,800 saved, you can afford the $120 upfront cost to switch to an annual prepaid plan that costs $25 per month, $300 annually, versus $540. You just saved $240 per year by having access to $120 upfront. You've been paying $35 per week at the laundromat, $1,820 annually. With $1,800 in savings, you can buy a used washer and dryer for $400, pay a plumber $150 to install them, and your costs drop to roughly $80 annually in electricity and water. You just saved $1,590 per year by having access to $550 upfront. The savings paid for the appliances in 4 months. You've been buying groceries in 3 small trips per week at whatever store is closest, paying premium prices because you can't do a large shop up front and you don't have transportation to reach the discount grocery store. With $1,800 saved, you can afford to buy groceries once per week in bulk, planning meals, using the savings to Uber to the cheaper store once weekly. Your grocery costs drop from $180 per week to $130 per week. That's $2,600 in annual savings. Just in these 3 areas: phone service, laundry, groceries. That $1,800 buffer enabled you to reduce your annual expenses by $4,430. That's the multiplication penalty in reverse. The buffer didn't just protect you from emergencies, it gave you access to the pricing tier that people with capital use by default. At $1,800, you become a different person, not because your character changed, but because your decision-making environment changed. You're no longer operating in permanent crisis mode. That cognitive bandwidth I mentioned, it starts coming back. You can think past next week. You can compare options. You can tolerate delayed gratification because you're not in immediate survival mode. This is where the identity shift happens. For the first time in potentially years, you're not a person to whom things happen, you're a person who makes choices. That distinction sounds philosophical, but it's intensely practical. When your boss schedules you for inventory on Saturday, but it's your daughter's birthday, you can say no. Not without consequences, but you can say no without risking homelessness. That $1,800 means you could survive 2 weeks unemployed if they fired you for refusing. You probably won't get fired, but the ability to accept that risk changes your posture entirely. When your landlord tries to raise rent by $150 monthly, you can negotiate or threaten to leave. You can't necessarily afford to leave, but you can afford the moving costs if you had to $900 for truck rental, deposit overlap, and transition expenses. That possibility changes the negotiation. Your landlord knows the difference between a tenant who's trapped and a tenant who has options. They adjust their demands accordingly. Here's what most financial advice misses. Having money doesn't just change what you can buy, it changes how people treat you and what opportunities become visible. With $1,800 saved, you can take a day off work to interview for a better job without risking bill payment. You can afford the $75 course that teaches the skill that unlocks a promotion. You can buy the slightly nicer clothes that signal competence in professional contexts. These aren't luxuries, they're investments that are only accessible once you have the buffer to take micro risks. Let me tell you about the opportunities that become visible at this level versus the emergencies that defined your life before it. Remember that feeling when something breaks and your stomach drops because you know you can't afford to fix it? At $1,800, that feeling changes texture. Something breaks, you're annoyed but not terrified. You handle it. The emotional register shifts from existential threat to manageable inconvenience. But here's the subtle part. When you're not constantly firefighting, you start noticing actual opportunities. Your coworker mentions their landlord is renting a better apartment for the same price you're paying, but it requires first month, last month, and security deposit up front. 6 months ago, that information was useless to you. Today, you could potentially access it. Same information, different meaning? A community college offers a weekend certification program that could increase your income by $8,000 annually. Cost is $650. 6 months ago, impossible. Today, it's a decision you can actually evaluate. You can ask whether the $650 investment produces a positive return rather than whether you physically have $650, which you didn't. Your car needs new tires. The shop offers 2 options: $220 for cheap tires that'll last 18 months, or $400 for quality tires that'll last 4 years with better gas mileage. 6 months ago, you'd take the cheap tires because $220 is all you have. Today, you can calculate $400 up front versus $220 every 18 months means you're spending $587 over 4 years with the cheap option versus $400 with the quality option. The quality tires save you $187 plus the better gas mileage. You choose quality. These aren't dramatic decisions, but they compound. Every time you can access the lower total cost option instead of the desperate minimum option, you're saving money that can rebuild your buffer or accelerate your escape from the multiplication penalty. The buffer enables better decisions, which generate savings, which reinforce the buffer. Here's the critical warning nobody gives you. When you finally hit $1,800 in savings, you will feel rich. Your nervous system, accustomed to having double-digit bank balances, will interpret this as abundance. You'll feel like you've made it. And that's precisely when the self-sabotage whisper starts. You've been so disciplined. You've sacrificed so much. You deserve something nice. You've never had this much money before. Maybe you should finally get that thing you've been wanting. Do not listen to that voice. That voice is your brain trying to return to homeostasis, the psychological comfort of the familiar, even when the familiar was suffering. $1,800 is not wealth. It's not even security. It's the minimum buffer that allows you to stop paying the poverty premium. Spending it on reward purchases drops you right back into the multiplication penalty zone where everything costs double. I've watched people hit $2,000 saved, decide they deserve a vacation, spend $1,400 on a weekend trip, and drop back to $600 in their account. Within 3 months, an emergency hits $700 car repair and they're right back in the overdraft cycle, borrowing from family, paying the poverty premium on everything. That weekend trip didn't cost $1,400. It cost them another year of financial instability. The $1,800 isn't your money to spend, it's your armor. It's the thing standing between you and the predatory pricing system that's been extracting wealth from you for years. Treat it as untouchable infrastructure, not as a reward fund. You don't get a reward for having a functioning immune system, it's just the baseline requirement for not being sick. Financial buffer is the same thing. Let me reframe the opportunity cost in a way that makes it visceral. That $1,400 vacation, let's trace what you're actually trading. With $1,800 saved, you could eliminate the $240 annual poverty premium on phone service, the $1,590 premium on laundry, and the $2,600 premium on groceries. That's $4,430 in annual savings, or $370 monthly. If you keep that $370 monthly and add it to your buffer instead of spending it, within 5 months, you have $1,800 plus $1,850 more, $3,650 total. At $3,650, you can afford to pay 6 months of car insurance up front instead of monthly, saving another $180 annually. You can increase your health insurance deductible from $1,000 to $3,000 and cut your monthly premium by $75, $900 annually. These moves save you another $1,080 per year or $90 monthly. Now you're banking $460 monthly. Within 1 year of hitting that initial $1,800 buffer, if you protect it and deploy the savings it generates, you can have $5,520 saved, plus the original $1,800, $7,320 total. At that level, you're thinking about certified used cars instead of subprime auto loans. You're thinking about online courses that increase your earning potential. You're thinking about moving to a better apartment or negotiating your current lease from a position of strength. That $1,400 vacation wasn't trading one weekend of enjoyment. It was trading the entire trajectory I just described, the escape velocity from poverty pricing into neutral pricing into wealth building. It was trading approximately $30,000 in improved financial position over 5 years for 72 hours of temporary relief from the stress that the $30,000 would have permanently eliminated. This isn't about never enjoying your life. This is about understanding that your future self is a real person with real needs, and they're counting on your current self to make decisions that protect them. 5 years from now, you won't remember the specific restaurant meals or purchases you forewent, but you will remember the day you looked at an unexpected expense and felt relief instead of panic. Here's what this approach looks like in practice over time. Year 1, you build the $1,800 buffer by any means necessary. You work overtime, you sell things you don't need. You cut every expense that isn't survival critical. It's unglamorous and exhausting, but you hit $1,800. Year 2, you protect that buffer religiously while deploying the savings it enables. You're saving roughly $370 monthly from reduced poverty premium expenses. By month 6, you have $4,020 saved. By month 12, you have $6,240. You're no longer living paycheck to paycheck, you have 9 weeks of expenses covered. Year 3, your increased savings enable you to make larger optimizations. You buy a reliable used car for cash, eliminating a $280 monthly car payment. You're now saving $650 monthly. By end of year 3, you have $13,800 saved. You're 3 months away from 1 year of expenses saved. Year 4, you have cognitive bandwidth to focus on income growth. You take that certification course. You negotiate a raise. You switch jobs for better pay. Your income increases by $12,000 annually. Because your expenses are controlled, that $12,000 goes straight to savings. Now you're putting away $1,650 monthly. By end of year 4, you have $33,600 saved. Year 5, you're thinking about investing. You open a Roth IRA and max it out $7,000 annually. You still save another $12,800. By end of year 5, you have $46,400 in savings and $7,000 starting to compound in retirement accounts. You went from $42 in your checking account to nearly $50,000 in assets in 5 years without winning the lottery or inheriting money. You did it by eliminating the poverty premium, protecting your buffer, and deploying the savings systematically. The trajectory isn't luck, it's mathematics. The multiplication penalty works in reverse once you have enough capital to escape it. Every dollar you save enables more efficient decisions, which generate more savings, which enable better decisions. The compound interest on good decisions made from stability is measured in decades of different life quality. If you take nothing else from this, understand this. Being broke is not a moral failing. It is not evidence of poor character or lack of discipline. It is a structural position in an economic system that charges a premium for not having money. The system is designed to keep you there through compound extraction. Every financial decision you make from poverty costs approximately double what it costs from stability, and that differential makes escape nearly impossible without understanding the mechanics. But the mechanics can be understood, and once you see them clearly, once you recognize that you're paying double for everything because you lack the capital buffer, not because you're making bad choices, you can start to dismantle the trap. The key isn't earning more, though that helps. The key is reaching the threshold where the multiplication penalty stops applying to you. $1,800 in liquid savings is that threshold. It's not prosperity, it's not financial freedom, it's escape velocity from the poverty premium. It's the point where money stops being a predator, extracting fees from your desperation, and starts being a neutral tool you can deploy strategically. The path is unglamorous. It requires saying no constantly. It requires becoming boring temporarily. It requires treating your future self like a real person whose needs matter as much as your present self's wants. But the alternative, remaining in the multiplication penalty zone where everything costs double and emergencies compound into catastrophes, that alternative is more expensive than any sacrifice required to escape it. 10 years from now, you won't remember the specific things you didn't buy while building that buffer, but you will remember the first time something broke and you fixed it without panic. You'll remember the first time you said no to exploitative terms because you could afford to walk away. You'll remember the shift from reacting to designing, from surviving to choosing. That's what $1,800 buys you. Not luxury, not even comfort, but choice. And choice, in a system engineered to eliminate it, is the most valuable asset you can own. Build the buffer. Protect the buffer. Let the math work in your favor for once. Your future self is waiting, and they're counting on you to start today.